Hi, I'm David Fox, and welcome to the Path of Self-Mastery. You know, I wanted to reach out to the beginner today, one who's just approaching the path of mastery of any of the spiritual disciplines for the first time. Or maybe you've been on the path for a bit and wondering about your progress and how long it takes to reach the goal. It can be hard and discouraging if you're not able to discern the tangible progress markers of the journey. It's not exactly like a physical journey of mastery where you go to school for 20 years and earn a master's degree, or maybe go the route of an apprenticeship with a master and learn some tradecraft where over the course of a decade or so you watch your skills grow and at some point develop the confidence to go out on your own. The spiritual journey is often not so cut and dried. What with all the fantastic topics to color this genre, there's a veritable library of Alexandria worth of knowledge, isn't there? Where to start? And where does it end? My God, first of all, there's the religions, right? That schooling is probably what got you on the idea of an existent God in the first place, or the idea that God consciousness is really a thing. Your questions led you to the discovery of monotheism, polytheism, pantheism, and now you're left wondering what to believe at all, so you call yourself a pagan because we all know deep down that at some level nature's always right? You begin to look at the philosophies, touching down lightly on Platonic first principles, still being called to an ephemeral godhead, and this leads you to Plato's metaphysics, which, being Greek after all, and a serious study that keeps real philosophers in their armchairs for decades, is not exactly what you're looking for. And that's when you remember Angel's Metaphysical Bookstore over there on 5th and Roger and amble in looking for something to clarify what is fast becoming a multi-leveled labyrinth of information. You know you're getting lost, but the knowledge is just, oh, so compelling, so you walk into the bookshop searching for an Ariadne's thread to keep you tethered to reality while you go deeper into the maze, and suddenly, poof, you're in China. Angel's put a copy of the Tao Te Ching on display closest to the entrance. The book jacket is just so captivating. Oh, and what are those funny-looking yarrow sticks next to another book with similar captivating symbols? Am I pronouncing this right? I Ching? What's a Ching, anyway? And now Dorothy's not in Greece anymore. She's just been whisked away to the Orient. She didn't even feel the tornado. Totally forgot what she was looking for, a thread to keep her grounded in Kansas. She walks out of that store with a heavy bag full of this and that, no closer to the goal. What was the goal again? That's the real question, isn't it? And before jumping through mind portals and trying to ascend into 7 dimensions of cosmic being, deal with the 3 dimensions closest to you first and work out from there. Or inward, according to whichever tradition you ultimately land on. More on that in a sec. But yeah, the question of the goal. Here, in the 3D physical dimension, we tend to set our goals based on Maslowian hierarchy of needs, right? These range from physiological needs like breathing and eating to security needs like a roof over our heads and gainful employment. There are love and belonging needs, self-esteem and self-actualization needs. And interestingly enough, it's often this last, the need for self-actualization, that drives the seeker out of the nest in the first place to search for that holy grail that's going to make them whole. Sigmund Freud coined the threefold dynamic of mind, viz. Ego, superego, id. But it was Carl Jung that would come along and tell us that these could be individuated into a whole, actualized persona. But that in order to do that, one would need to establish communication with their shadow, or their subconscious mind. Carl spent his entire life on this particular path, and left us with some pretty good books if we found ourselves wanting to take up that work. One is called Archetypes and the Subconscious Mind, another is simply called The Red Book. Not to be confused with Mao Zedong's little book of aphorisms by the same name, but you see, we're still talking about the goal and how quickly this conversation can spiral out of control. Here on Earth, we know we've but to get a job to make ends meet, and the question is little more complicated than what do I want to do in order to make those ends meet? Because we absolutely have to take care of our Maslowian needs in proper order, right? If you don't meet the physiological needs, you're quite simply going to be dead. Period. And we all know this. We've been taught this. Our teachers and parents have given us the basic knowledge to be able to go out and make the proper decisions that are going to allow us to keep ourselves alive and thrive on this great guest house we all share for 100 years or so. It's common sense. And in the West, at least, our final years of matriculation are already designed to show us the choices that are coming. We get to choose electives of study before going on to a college to choose a major. Itself based on a field we intend to involve ourselves within in an active employment or research later. It's all very logical, deductive, and constructive. 3D needs, physical, emotional, and mental needs, real needs that must be met and that are met or can be met with a systematic approach to the meeting, right? If we want to do a particular job or master a particular craft, there is definitely a particular approach guaranteed to aid that design. There's an approach to enable us to raise our emotional intelligence quotient. There are approaches to tweak our cognizance and intelligence. And these needs should be met at least in conjunction with forays into the spiritual dimension. Too often I see people running plumb away from the physical to embrace an ephemeral spiritual. And that is really the hard way. We are physical. Start with the 5 senses before going to the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Start with the body, the mind, and the heart, for want of a better word, because it's obviously not the heart that's feeling. Some neurochemistry. Anyway, did you know that our 3D reality is a model of reality that has been debated since ancient Greece and is still debated by scientists the world over? The current consensus has it that the integral component of our 3D reality is a thermodynamic quality called the Helmholtz free energy density. Now, in a radiation-filled universe, you can think of this free density as a kind of pressure being exerted on all space, which depends both on the universe's temperature and a number of spatial dimensions. In one study, researchers showed that as the universe began cooling from the moment of the Big Bang, the Helmholtz density reached its first maximum value when the universe was just a fraction of a second old, and at that point, at the point it had reached 3 spatial dimensions. Now, all of this is just a theory, but the idea is that 3D space was frozen in at this point, prohibiting itself from transitioning to other dimensions. Now, we're all fairly familiar with the play of the 4th dimension, time, in our local space-time continuums, but this video is for you guys and gals who got caught up early on the idea that there was something more and took yourselves out exploring. And you're either still looking for the right approach or you've gotten lost on the meandering paths and need to find your way back. Your imagination has taken you to places like parallel universes and alternate realities, but ask yourself, is this you? Is this particular path of knowledge something that you are really wanting to master? Is that your mission? Is that why you're here? Because if it is, you have to look at superstring theory. Physics will take you straight down that rabbit hole beyond our local 4 dimensions all the way to the 10th. Is that what you have in mind? Do you want to know the reality, or are you satisfied to wade around in the fancy of your imagination? There must be an endgame. You must come to the end of your path at some point. A seeker must be enabled to find. A novice must achieve mastery at some stage. Or what was the point of the journey? Yeah, sure, some people say that the journey itself is the point, not the destination. Well, sure, if we're being all metaphorical again. Be here now is a thing. The present moment is all that exists is a thing. But you're going to be hungry if you don't put food in your mouth is also a thing, and hence planning becomes required. And so aspects of the journey tend to get decided for us, like commerce and supermarkets. But once you set your sights on the mystical, you do well to have an idea at the outset of what your goal is, of where you want to go. Are you looking for God? I was. Took myself over to the Holy Land straight out of high school, steeped myself in the Kabbalah. Wouldn't you know it, my mission got sidetracked by a girl, but I was young, still had time. Now, the Kabbalah is a huge study, beginning with the Zohar, the foundation of Jewish mystical thought. It covers the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and if I'd been really serious about that path, I would have stayed in the Negev. Apprenticed myself to an old Hasid, learned the language like the back of my hand before exploring Aramaic and perhaps dabbling in other Mesopotamian proto-languages, but at least I would have confined myself to the general area and kept myself on a straight path towards the goal. Because of course, the Kabbalah is all about the evolution of man back to God consciousness. I would have traced my journey on the Tree of Life in the Book of Creation, sublimated my soul while on this earth, earning a PhD in some obscure philosophy, taking tenure at Stanford and hiring myself out on the side to the Meru Foundation, and like Indiana Jones, I would get paid handsomely to deliver from my sojourns into the desert the occasional trove of semiotic relevance for their research museum. But that wasn't my path. As the universal synchronicity would have it, another Carl Jung by the way, I was to be going off to Japan. Led by the nose by that sweet lass I met in the desert, I needed to discover Buddhism before my path would crystallize. I needed to fulfill other longings. Maslow's real needs for certainty and uncertainty called out to me like a Gemini. An urge eastward had been pulling at me since my mama first showed me an old Akira Kurosawa movie when I was just a babe. Couldn't know that at the time of that viewing, the sage, who would initiate me into my final destiny in the Himalaya on the path of yoga, was at that very moment giving discourse in the quaint Japanese village setting of Kurosawa's movie. So anyway, I followed the voice. I followed my heart, so to speak. Synchronicity is a thing too. The butterfly effect is a thing. This universe of tangents and seemingly separate existence is anything but, and the keen eye developed to analyze the connections and discern the relevance and put them to use for conscious purpose, well, that can be learned, strengthened. But even before giving yourself to that particular exercise, trust a little. Trust your own heart. It might have the weight of universal wisdom behind its promptings. In my case, I needed to be in Japan. Not so much to explore the minor fascinations I'd still held with the martial arts, not even to nurture the very real need for a woman's love, but I would absolutely have to meet the Jupiter King in an old shopping arcade in downtown Kobe in order to be thrust headlong into my fate for real. I needed to receive his library of 700 books. I needed to hole up in my cave for several long years like Dr. Joseph Campbell before me. I needed to go through all that, learning the arcana that would open my mind's eye, show me the Akasha, teach me how to meditate in order to discover the true meaning of Kung Fu, inner truth, in order that when I found myself in the park that night, having a beer with my mates after work, I, unlike many of the park goers around me, would not be turning my nose up with socially biased disregard when Peter Pan came dancing in front of me, encouraging me to play with her. But rather, I would recognize quickly the drama for what it was and understand that there should be a troop leader nearby, awaiting me in a golden chariot to usher me on to the next stage of my development. Well, indeed there was, and I would be boarding a Cessna with him in a matter of months to touch down in the most picturesque little Himalayan hamlet this side of a storybook. A hamlet that I would be calling my home for the next 20 years as I discovered the magical, mystical path of the Wisdom Kings, the Jnana Yogin. Synchronicity is a thing. Path mastery is a thing. Self-development is a thing. Human needs are a thing. Knowledge and wisdom, the ages of reason, the great enlightenment, these are all things. What's your path? The witch goes to nature, the yogi goes to wander, the alchemist creates a laboratory. Each of these paths has an approach, a measure, and a mode of sustenance. You who are experiencing the Kundalini awakening, you need to be looking at the path of yoga, discovering Sanskrit and the 5,000-year-old wisdom body that talks directly to your experience. You who are called to Reiki and light healing, you need to be looking at the real potential of our thermodynamic 3D energetic reality model. Science and philosophy are not enemies, but actually the best of friends, and physics and metaphysics are the closest of siblings. There is a real approach to mastery, and it begins with clarity, bolstered by determination and effort. It's not switched on with the flip of a switch, but takes years, decades, most often a lifetime. There are progress markers to be sure, real learning and great experience to be had along the way. Hey, everyone knows masterclass.com by now, right? Aren't they awesome? Steve Martin teaches you comedy, Carlos Santana teaches you how to play the guitar. For $100 a year, you have access to the masters. No one-on-one coaching or QA sessions, but still, take a class from the father of mindfulness studies, Jon Kabat-Zinn, or the one I really like, Apollonia Poulain. She teaches us how to bake bread. Oh, what a class. True master classes delivered by real masters of their tradecraft, all gathered together on one convenient little library. And you can go explore all that and learn some really, really great stuff. But which of those arts is the one, or two, or three that you really are going to devote yourself to unto mastery? Because just taking one of those classes won't make you a master, but can certainly light the fuse, right? It'll definitely push you in the right direction. My bread baking skills have achieved truly notable breakthroughs. Those folks are real and certifiable masters of their craft, and yet even with such accessibility, such reasonable pricing, such brilliant presentation, most people will let the membership go completely to waste. A few will dabble, and a few will find their destiny. Hey, I've also got a masterclass too. Not available on masterclass.com, but pretty good all the same and worth the $100 ticket if you're really interested to learn how to approach this path of self-mastery, to learn how to develop that steel that'll take you all the way to the Philosopher's Stone and completely ignite your human potential to accomplish absolutely anything at all. Intrigued? Follow the link to learn more.